So we are trying to show you some projects in which our effort is to find the good questions that will guide our decisions. And not pretending to find the answers, but to make us think about the meaning of our building should convey with the means we have at our disposal. We consider our work as an ongoing research. We're always learning, in which each project informs the next ones in terms of hypotheses, strategies, and building processes. And in Peru, we may not have enough economic or technological means, but we have great ingredients as our chefs in Peru that are at our disposal to make architecture. And those are culture, technology, climate, place, program, and technology. And in each project, these ingredients are combined differently in order to define the essential elements of architecture, which of course are space, light, matter, and time.
And our first ingredient, that is culture, is the reason of meaningful experiences that are integrated in our minds and then arising to our consciousness when doing a project. So our long stay in Europe, we spent there 16 years, and a patient search through drawing helped us create a personal visual culture from experiencing the actual building. So we were creating our culture, and then of course the research by the doing is nourishing also our culture. In each project we go from sketches to drawings to models to precise drawing into the reality, and then back again to sketches, models, and drawings. So it's a circular dynamic between mind, hand, and matter. This patient search structures the relations between our project. The different needs and aspirations from the clients, the nature and scale of the program, the singularity of geographies, climate, and places are essential to an approach that seeks to blur the boundaries between the vast territorial scale and the small detail of an architectural element. These drawings of our built projects, shown at the same scale, constitute our own design culture. We are increasingly asking ourselves if nature, territory, landscape, and architecture can still be seen as interdependent and with the same value. We try to abandon the modernist, rigid separation of the disciplines of architecture, urban design, and landscape architecture, which have become distinct and often polarized professions.
Yeah, understanding our territory, as you see here in Pachacamac in Lima, territory is our second ingredient and is key to our work. Alexander von Humboldt was the first European to realize that the section and not the plan is the only way to understand the Central Andes region, where modern Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru are located. In Peru, the combination of the Andes and a cold current coming from Antarctica produce a unique tropical landscape. So we will redraw this section, including the sea current named after Humboldt. We start by an horizontal line that represents the ocean, the west on the left, the east to the right. Then comes an extremely steep topography with a 10,000 meters or 30,000 feet gradient in distance of only 200 kilometers. these geographical circumstances generate a unique landscape and a unique climate. In the Amazonian basin, at right, climate responds to a normal tropical condition, while at left, in the Pacific basin, a permanent mild temperature and no precipitation at all happens when the seawater convection and an air thermic inversion combine to create an almost permanent cloud over the coastal desert strip. And Lima, our city, is placed right in the left circle between the abyss and the summit, which we feel even if we don't see them because of the ocean, of course, and the almost permanent clouds that hide the mountains. We'll show you 7 projects that are linked by this section. They can also be understood by their own section, and we will try to explain them by the sections, because we like to think that if the plan allows to understand distribution of spaces, only the section reveals the wonder of space, light, and time playing together. So these conditions of this section make our topic very different from the usual image we have of this latitude. Instead of in the coast, where Lima is, instead of palm trees and white sand beaches that we expect from a tropical setting, we have this extremely arid, but at the same time, yet very humid desert.
And these conditions generate a very mild climate. That is our third ingredient. And climate gives us huge opportunity for redefining architecture and its role of providing shelter. With absence of rains, extreme hot or cold days, no strong winds, we can concentrate our efforts in the architecture's capacity of being generous despite budget limitations, and in the creation of intimacy and well-being. Space expands beyond the limits of the building, and interior and exterior are not defined by airtightness, but by the relationship between intimacy and vastness. It is on the edge of the Bay of Lima where we had the opportunity to build the place for remembrance. This project is about making a place for reconciliation of Peruvian people, a cultural center that would articulate the efforts of an entire generation to convey to the future ones the memory of 20 years of extreme violence that devastated our country and left more than 70,000 deaths. This place has become vital in the aspiration to prevent repeating the errors of the past.
So place is our fourth ingredient, where layers of memory are frozen, waiting to be revealed by our addition. We started our understanding of the site through its own memory. The site where we had to intervene was a residual area left by the destruction of one of those successions of cliffs and ravines that characterize the Bay of Lima, when the roadway that you see at right was built to connect the beaches with the city. And we decided to embed the building within this territorial logic by building an artificial cliff. And in that way, our addition would be related to the memory not only by its programmatic content, but by the memory of Lima's landscape. And in fact, the building closes a sequence of cliffs and ravines that is long more than 10 kilometers that characterizes the Bay of Lima. And in the same way, that territory is more easily understood by a section, as Humboldt showed us. We'll explain our projects by this section. No? So we draw a cut-off longitudinal section of the cliffs and we can visualize the infill made to create the descent to the beach. So we decided to do a compact building near the natural cliff, which allows us to economize both on the number of foundation piles and their depth. In this way, the territorial logic could also meet the economic logic. And this simple strategy opened us possibilities for responding also to environmental needs. Opening the building to the cliff allowed a controlled natural lighting, and closing it to the northwest at right prevent us from the sunlight to the setting sun and the noise of the coastal highway. So an open inner space could be created and would function with natural ventilation, limiting the use of air conditioning to the auditorium alone. So
the site, the site had still a strong handicap. There was almost no connection to the city. A long distance separated the site from the main urban avenue with public transportation. So we decided to transform this major problem into a design opportunity. We created a narrow passage to introduce time in the way we approach the building. The visitor can take the time to distance himself from the city, leave daily preoccupations behind, and get ready for an exhibit which is not easy to see. The visitor is really submerged in a gap created between the cliff and the building. The act of descending into this crevice turns gravity into a very explicit force. And at the bottom of this newly created ravine, there is a marked physical consciousness, a kind of intensified presence. We are no more in a urban setting, nor in a natural landscape. And the other side of this artificial cliff, that is the building, is defined by a platform that looks over the sea, conceived as a public space for reconciliation.
And the program, our fifth ingredient, isn't of course a list of functions, but the way usage can inform space as a container of experiences. So the experience of space through time is essential while we walk through the building. The different exhibition spaces are accessible through a series of ramps inside this very rational building, and climbing from the bottom of the ravine up to the rooftop, where visitors go back to the city. So in this museum, the hall and gift shop are not the meeting point between those who get in and those who get out, but the city itself. And it was very important for us to do that. The ramps helped also to slow down time in the interior and separates the path of the eyes from the path of the feet. So we can have a complete vision of space while climbing. And so the experience of space is in time is enhanced. This is an image of the completed building before the collection came in. And all the different programs are accessible through these ramps. And the understanding of the site section is critical to create specific entrances or access to the different programs so they can function independently. And this, of course, contribute to the economic sustainability of the cultural compound because they can open and be rented, etc.
So technology, our sixth ingredient, is defined by what's available in the place we are working. And craftsmanship and limited resources are what we have at our disposal. So it makes sense to combine them, making the handmade imperfection our ally. The building process is therefore very important, as the design process does not finish with construction drawings, and the act of building is also an act of memory. The artisanal formwork assembled by hand using old wooden planks, the cobblestone pavement, and the traces of handcrafting are the evidence of human labor and become the memory of human intervention. So the workers put their hands in the entry to the public plaza as a tribute to the hands that literally built this place. And now let's see how the building becomes alive. We have a little video.
So we go now from Lima to the other side of the Andes, where the ancient Peruvians transformed the vertical landscape of the Andes to make it inhabitable. Water scarcity led to the construction of a system of agricultural-based water management infrastructures. And this system has survived to the Spanish conquest and to the monoculture farming, although global warming will radically change it as glaciers are melting very fast in the tropical Andes. When we were called to do a master subdivision plan in the Sacred Valley, not far from Cusco, we proposed to deal with topography by the traditional terraces, which would also materialize the required allotment. And using the traditional infrastructure for leveling the ground and conducting the water, we could recover a landscape that humans have transformed for centuries. And some few years later, we built a house there. As in the place of remembrance, geography is so powerful that we felt the house could not refer to local architecture, but to mountains, to geography. The challenge was to converge the vastness of the territory with the intimacy of living spaces. So we followed again the strategies of the people who managed this landscape for centuries. We start drawing the sacred mountains of Pituciray at left, down in the valley, and the natural slope is modified in platforms and terraces to create space for living, and then a pitched roof and a gutter frame the mountain and create the place of intimacy by defining a courtyard. Sun from the east warms the house in the morning, while the setting sun at right hits the stone cladding of the roof and diffuses heat at nighttime. So here we can see the terraces, the roof, the framing of the lower part of the valley. And in order to make the vastness intelligible, ancient Peruvians shaped rocks as a gift to sacred mountains, as you see at left. And using the same strategy, we wanted our project to relate human scale to the unmeasurable of these huge mountains. And by referring to geography instead of historical architecture, we could relate to the place and memory in a more meaningful way. At least we believe that, seeking design principles instead of historical forms.
And not far from there, in Moray, we won an international competition for designing an agricultural research center and lodging. So Moray is considered an Incan agricultural laboratory for adapting plants to higher altitudes. This was for us an opportunity to propose a research center that would focus not on agriculture itself, but in managing water resources in the era of global warming. So we decided that the project should follow the same strategy the Incas employed. So taking advantage of the environment and orientations to create favorable conditions for life. So at left, we have the Moray Inca Laboratory, and at right, we have this ravine and our proposed research center in the edge of it. So we downscaled the ancient infrastructural systems for water retaining as infiltration canals, reservoirs, and terraces to the architectural scale in order to collect water and use it during the dry season. The combination of the different systems defined the intervention on the site. And a careful use of the site's topography combining excavation and infill, we can see it on the section in the upper part, allowed us to take advantage of an existing ravine and the existing slope for bringing natural light to all spaces with a minimum impact on landscape. The laboratory have a view over the ravine, and the social areas gather around a water reservoir, or cocha, as we say in Quechua. So this is a view of the site towards Moray, and we can see that the ravine solves all the logistics of the Water Management Research Center, and the protected platforms and its gardens provide the immediate intimacy to the guest rooms and the study rooms. And this is looking from Moray, and the subtle earth movement is almost invisible from the archaeological site.
So let's go back again to the other side of the Andes, to the Paracas Desert. One of the most arid desert in the world, but also, unsurprisingly, inhabited for centuries. Paracas people lived there like 2,000 years ago, and were the predecessors of the Nazca people, the ones who traced the famous Nazca lines. So the Paracas Archaeological Site Museum was destroyed by a strong earthquake in 2007, and the European Union financed its reconstruction and launched an architectural competition the following year. We had a very meager budget and a sublime landscape as main ingredients for this project. And for us, it was not only about designing an archaeological museum, but also an attempt to introduce landscape logics into architecture. Seen from the archaeological burial site, the museum is perceived as a layer built over thousands of other geographical and cultural layers. And we wanted the building to modify landscape and at the same time depend on it, as would a rock or a trace in the desert. We decided to keep the memory of the previous museum by building on the exact same location, respecting the overall volume and geometry, and by the way, avoiding archaeological surveys that were mandatory if we built elsewhere in that site, and we were allowed to do that in the competition. So you can see the landscape is like a Martian landscape. A porch announces the entrance to the enclosure, acting as a threshold between the vastness of the desert and the open air inner circulation. The different programs are related among them by this contained exterior space. The main volume shelter the archaeological exhibition, while the thin volume in dark gray and to the right in the image hosts the workshop, the services, and spaces for the community. So a single-story building has a rational plan and a labyrinthine space common in pre-Columbian architecture. Right in the plan, you can see the in gray suspended structure that we call the environmental device. So these elements define the roof that is considered as a fifth facade as an element that can protect us from the sun and the strong winds of this region. Finally, a series of low-tech environmental devices find their place beneath the roof and help define the exhibition spaces. So these low-tech devices help us to control natural light and ventilation, and will be able to receive more technological equipment if necessary in the future. You know, this museum is in a very remote place, and it has no artificial lighting at all. So when the sun sets, they close the museum. So a big effort should be done to have the right amount of light, of natural light for the exhibition. The devices are also structural elements, and when they reach the southern facade, they become windows that are framing the burial sites. And the exterior is finished with the same polished ceramic technique for finishing the pre-Columbian vases that are rescaled to the size of the building. We used a natural reddish red cement that is pozzolanic, and we hand polish it as if it was a huge ancient vase. So this color is obtained only by the color of the cement, which has a lot of ferrite, and it
oxidized, no?
Yeah, it rusts with the air, so it acquires this magnificent color.
So in a climate where rain is inexistent, circulation can be open air, intermediate spaces that flow between volumes. The same strategy can be applied to a urban house project. And in Lima, we did it. We were asked to design a house in a typical urban plot, 15 meters wide and 35 meters deep. And we decided to create our own landscape in the confined space of the plot, with the back neighbor at left and the street at right. We then defined the limits of the plot, mandatory in the urban regulations. We introduced open-air features as a pool at left, a pond at right, and gardens planted with trees. In between, a series of 3 vaulted bridges spread over the width of the plot. And these bridges sustain the program of bedrooms and intimate spaces, leaving the ground floor completely fluid and open, revealing the microcosmos within. So from the street, the house doesn't reveal its interior. The first vault bridge acts as a threshold between the street and the interior landscape. Once you cross it, space suddenly unfolds. We discover a world where interior and exterior blurs with reflection and transparency. The space expands through the vaulted bridges, liberating the boundaries between house, garden, and pool. Living spaces unfold seamlessly between gardens, while in the second floor, the vaulted bridges are linked by suspended metallic walkways. So this is the last exterior space. And
yeah, not far from here, we were asked to design a restaurant where we were told to do a project who would synthesize Lima's architecture paired with very good Liman food. So the strategy was similar. We thought these aspects of climate, of absence of rain, gray sky, should be at the core of the project, taking in account also the noisy Metropolitan Avenue crossing the neighborhood. So the typical introspection of colonial and pre-Hispanic residents and their lighting and ventilation devices were very useful for this project. Enclosure helps to create here a quiet place. 5 modular volumes are supported by the enclosure, organizing a series of indoor exterior spaces. The modules host different functions, and the spaces in between create a fluid space where more informal atmosphere are proposed. The intermediate space is alternately compressed and expanded by the asymmetric arrangement of these 5 modules, producing the quality of an intimate urban space, or as we call it, the exterior indoor, where Lima's white sky becomes like a ceiling. From the street, the building appears as quite opaque and introverted, and only the skylights give us a hint of what will be discovered inside. And we get in by a gap between 2 modules, leading us to a protected indoor exterior, as we were saying. Each module defines a precise space, a different kind of culinary experience. We sit differently in each place, but at the same time, all of them open up and merge with a completely open exterior space. And when asked for designing a lecture building in the Peruvian Northern Desert, we found it was relevant to apply also this discrete building scheme and brought it to a very different scale and with a very different intention.
In the city of Piura, 1,000 kilometers north from here, from Lima, and only 4 degrees south from the equator, the local university needed more space for welcoming a new student population from low-income rural backgrounds, being able to pursue their educations thanks to a government scholarship. So in 2015, Piura University accepted 700 of these students, so new facilities of generic classrooms and faculty offices were needed. Their aspiration was to take this opportunity to improve teaching infrastructure and give us the opportunity to go beyond a standard response to this need. When the university was founded 50 years ago, it looked like the top image in 73. And when the Niño from 1983 came, it's the Niño phenomenon, bringing heavy rains in the desert, the university decided that the next thing to do after the completion of the first building you see was to keep the campus construction by planting carob trees. This vision took the university to look as in the bottom image today. And the decision of start developing a campus by creating shade in the harshness of the sun and extreme dry heat of the savanna landscape of northern Peru was, of course, a big inspiration for us. And again, the section can help us understand the project. So we start drawing the soft hills of the tropical dry forest, then the planted carob trees, and the clearing left for future buildings. We start by extending the shade of the forest at the place of the building. So a single horizontal line is created to define a shaded space capable of creating good conditions for learning. Then the program grows, as in La Tourette, from the rooftop down to the ground. The result is a series of buildings which are less important than the spaces left in between them.
So these are the places for informal learning, the creation of non-hierarchical in-between spaces for students to study, eat, connect, and discuss together outside the classrooms contributes to create a sense of community. And we had these two very different populations of students that we had to deal with. So for us, social and economic boundaries should be blurred between the newly arrived rural students and the local urban ones. And that space was the space in between buildings. And as in the dry forest, like Sandra was saying, where the single tree is not more important than the whole, 6 different building types form 11 independent structures disposed in a regular volume of 70 meters by 70 meters and 9 meters high. And this apparently compact scheme shelters a permeable shaded space. Each single building responds in shape and form to its use as an amphitheater, a workshop, a faculty office. And the regular functional shape defines at the same time a multiplicity of irregular in-between spaces. So being perfectly orientated to the cardinal points, the natural cross-ventilation from the southern winds makes air conditioning unnecessary, therefore reducing the energy consumption. And the complex is also not only permeable to the wind, but to the people, and it has access from 3 sides, so that it becomes a shaded crossroad in the campus. Today, at a given time, almost 40% of the people in the complex don't have classes in it. So it has become a place to stay, to meet other people, and have informal conversations. And so we were inspired at the beginning by the forest, but it has become, in fact, a busy urban space in the campus.
And following the logics of an oriented building, the south and the north sides are protected by vertical louvers, which are very efficient to protect both facades in this latitude. In the west facade, a system of prefab concrete panels protect the faculty offices from the setting sun. And the east side building faces the access from the campus pedestrian pathway and hosts the ramps that connects both levels.
The entrance building is in fact a threshold where we pass from the strong glare of the equator to the shaded exterior spaces of the learning landscape. The lattice shuttering, these concrete prefab panels, serve as light modulators in order to accommodate our eyes to the shaded half-light spaces while we go up through the ramps, through the stairs, or just entering the building. And the narrow gaps that single buildings leave between them help the light come in to these exterior-interior spaces and favors natural lighting and ventilation. And the gaps, because the building is oriented with the cardinal points, the gaps are also oriented, and the ones oriented east-west are in fact calendars that register the sun inclination of the year, while the others that are oriented north-south are sun clocks that register the daily movement of the sun.
There are all through the building spaces where people can gather, rest, or chat in between classes. Spaces are modulated to favor different kinds of gathering, even an informal class. And as we get into the complex, these spaces become more important until we arrive to its core, where the intermediate spaces are crossed by a stretch of the tropical dry forest.
So let's see now how a normal day go by in this building. We will show in 3 minutes time a whole day. Indeed, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.